Hello everyone, my name is Redbeard and today we'll be looking at Anethra and Duriath Helbane as the final Dark Elf DLC. This is part 2 of my Dark Elf speculation for the Slaanesh DLC. You can check out part 1 in the top right or description. In that video, I talk about FLC reworks, Talaris Dreadbringer, other heroes, and lay down the groundwork for this video. Besides the Helbanes as legendary lords, this video will cover Shadowblade as a legendary hero, missing generic characters and units. My next video will cover the High Elves with Sea Lord Aisling, who will likely start in the Eastern Colonies. In my Slaanesh video, I covered missing units from the Druchii, cults of excess such as the Anointed. Dark Elves are missing a sea-themed DLC but already have Lokhir. They are also missing all their lores of magic. All to say there are many reasons the Helbanes are the right option for this DLC. So now let's go through a rundown of their lore. Anethra Helbane is one of the most ancient and powerful sorceresses that helped Maelithii form the Dark Convent. She was born before the time of the Sundering and raised amongst the cults of excess. She was a noblewoman of Nagaryth and married to her first husband Kedron Helbane. Kedron traveled with Malekith the world over and would become one of his chief lieutenants in the civil war known as the Sundering. He would end up being slain, leaving Anethra a widow in control of the city once known as Cairn. When the Sundering tore apart Nagaryth, those still loyal to Malekith used powerful sorcery to save their castles and created the first Black Arks. The once city known as Cairn was now a Black Ark known as the Temple of Spite. It is unclear when Anethra remarried to Duriath, or even if maybe there weren't other husbands in between. She is at least 5,000, where it can be inferred that he may only be around 1,000 years old. After fleeing Nagaryth, Anethra would live in Grond for a time, essentially co-founding the Dark Convent of Sorceresses. In the most recent few thousands of years, though, she has lived in a great mansion in Clar Karond with her son Narek. From here, she has built a powerful dynasty that permeates through Dark Elf society. She controls armies, economies, raiding fleets, sorceress artifacts, temples of Khaine, and has even successfully outmanipulated Maelithii on occasion. But of course, they are close allies. The most important thing she controls, though, is her husband Duriath, and through him, the mighty Black Ark aforementioned. For as Anethra is only second to Maelithii, Duriath is only second to Lokhir Shipbuilding, a young but powerful Fleetmaster. His fleet of corsairs has been successful all around the world, sacking the Far East, cities of Ind, fighting ferocious lizards on the Dragon Isles, despoiling villages of the Southlands, and even waging wars against the Elector Counts of the Empire. All the slaves, plunder, and artifacts he collects are funneled back to Clar Karond, to his wife Anethra. His most recent ambition is to take the High Elf colonies in the Isles of Elithis and the Gates of Calith. If successful, the Druchii will gain a stranglehold on the Sea of Dread in the Jade Sea, all the way to the Boiling Sea. This would lead to far more riches flowing into Clar Karond, Anethra, and then furthermore bolstering their dynasty. Additionally, this could pair well against what I will propose for Sea Lord Aisling's mechanic of bolstering the High Elf colonies, in that he's trying to get a hold of crystals of power given to ancient High Elf sea commodores, but were then lost and tainted by the Dark Elves. Perhaps the Helbanes are also looking for these artifacts. So all that being said, why does all that make Anethra and Duriath Helbane the perfect pick to lead the DLC? We are missing units such as Sea Dragons, Helldrakes in the elite Black Ark Reavers, and mind you then need Duriath and Anethra Helbane. With Duriath, we would get a rework to Fleetmasters, making them true Corsair Lords with Sea Dragon cloaks and mounts. When a Black Ark is docked in a port, your Fleetmaster may be able to disembark, to raid the land within the sphere of influence, but no further. The Black Ark would be vulnerable during this time if the port is attacked. The Fleetmaster's army will degrade every turn until that port is retaken or they die. Anethra would bring the missing lores for the sorceress lords and heroes, as they could control all 8 primary winds plus dark in tabletop. The missing lores are as follows: Heavens, Life, Light, and Metal. To be different from Maelithii, I would give her a mix of these new lores plus dark. I may give her a Doom Reaver chariot, which is mobile magic artillery pulled by Hellldrakes. Then I would give the Sea Dragon to Duriath for his mount. He would also be the first Dark Elf legendary character with a ranged missile attack, either with the traditional brace of Corsair handbows or a repeater crossbow. When starting the Helbane campaign, it would make sense to have Anethra as your traditional legendary lord, army leader, and Duriath as your pseudo-legendary lord, Fleetmaster, in control of their unique Black Ark, the Temple of Spite. They should get substantially buffed when reinforcing each other, kind of like Vlad and Isabella used to do. Or you could pick one to be your legendary lord and the other becomes a legendary hero. I don't think this works as well, but if it were the case, they should be a pseudo-horde, as Sea Lord Acelin or Lokhir Fellheart should get this treatment as well. Duriath is known to seek artifacts in the east, and Anethra brings them back to Karond to build a powerful dynasty. For this, I would give them the Black Armoury mechanic from tabletop. Go on raiding and quest battles to unlock legendary items. Perhaps if we ever got the Naga of Koresh, the crowning item would be looking for the White Sistrum. Any of the artifacts that tend to come out of the hinterlands of Koresh are steeped in blood and misunderstood power. The White Sistrum is one of these artifacts, a strange ivory-graven rattle-drum shaped like an hourglass, whose discordant music brings madness and death, and evokes the terrible rites of the Naga, invoking their power and the slaughter of forgotten ages when the cold-blooded serpents of chaos held the world in a stranglehold of terror. I imagine this could be the Eastern equivalent to the Sword of Khaine or the Nemesis Crown. So to cap off my ideas on their mechanics, you could do the Black Armory sort of like a Forge of Daith, like the Sisters of Twilight mechanic, or perhaps it would be more like the Forge from the Dwarf faction, or maybe it's just, has some of those kind of flavors and inspiration, but it's obviously more Dark Elf themed. So now let's look at generic characters, and for Dark Elves we need some FLC love. First being the Black Ark Fleetmaster, but also in missing sorceress lores. So for those that say that the DLC lord should be the Black Ark Fleetmaster, that makes no sense, because we already have it in the game. We just need proper unique ones. And plus, they would only be for Black Ark, so you can't recruit them as a regular lord. So again, they should be part of an FLC rework 100%. The standard Dreadlord leading the Black Ark needs to be retired. Like Lokhir and Duriath, they would focus on buffing your Black Ark and Sea-themed units. They may also have the Merciless Slaver rule, lowering enemy leadership. They would wear Sea Dragon cloaks and be anti-infantry duelists. With the handbows, they would also make good ranged skirmishers, so a Lord option kind of like we have for the Khainite Assassin heroes. The best part about them, though, is their mount selection from the new units, which may include Helldrakes, Doom Reavers, and Sea Dragons. So along with Anethra, we should get the missing sorceress lores. I get why they were not added before, but at this point they should be added for lords and heroes. In tabletop, Dark Elf sorceresses could use all 8 primary winds, and again, those missing lores in Total War are Light, Life, Heavens, and Metal. For both the Fleetmasters and the missing sorceresses, as I said, they need to be FLC. For DLC, the Lord we're missing is one for your Harganeth themed armies, or Khaine themed armies. Disciples of Khaine would be your Executioner Lord, or generic Talaris, so to speak. he would be a heavily armored, anti-infantry blender. He would have abilities to turn his units into a rampaging lawnmower blob. Other Dark Elf lords get a plethora of mounts, but the Disciple of Khaine should fight exclusively on foot. I suppose you could alternatively go with like a Hag Queen or Priestess instead as like a generic Helebron, who would serve as a similar purpose to the Disciple. The key differences being that she has poison attacks, very little armor, and would at the least have a Cauldron of Blood mount, maybe a Manticore mount as well. I would personally prefer a generic Executioner character though, since we already have a Death Hag hero. For a new Dark Elf hero, we kinda have to scrape the bottom of the barrel, so to speak, but I think I've got two interesting angles that will fill unique roles. So they made the Master a Dark Elf version of a High Elf Noble, and gave us a High Beastmaster for a Lord, so we don't really have a bestial focused hero, but then the obvious hero for a CPAC might be Corsair focused, so comes the idea for a Black Ark Beastslaver, which is the best of both worlds. Buffs your bestial units, particularly those that are sea themed, would largely act similar to a Fleetmaster with a Sea Dragon cloak in combat, but would be possibly anti-large instead with a trident and a whip. She should also come with bound netting abilities to capture new beasts and other enemies alike. Perhaps she can even throw a chemical agent to slow and eventually paralyze enemies, making them easier to catch. She should come with Dark Steed, Helldrake, and Manticore mounts. Finally, like Black Ark Reavers are the champion unit for Corsairs and Tabletop, Doomfire Warlocks had a Master of Warlocks. There are too many Masters though, so I think we can simply call them Doomfire Sorcerers. They would fill the same role in the Dark Elf roster that Lore Masters of Hoeth do for the High Elves, that being a hybrid melee magic, master of all trades type hero. This Master of Warlocks hero would fit well in this DLC, as all Warlocks were cursed by Malekith to have their souls slowly consumed by the Dark Prince Slaanesh. The Sorcerer would be a decent anti-infantry combatant with magic and poison attacks, 2 bound Lesser Doom Bolts, and automatically mounted on a Dark Steed would be a nice touch. Perhaps then he could unlock a Dark Pegasus mount. The real reason you would want to bring him though is for his spellcasting. I would give him, like the Lore Master, a mixed lore. The lores that fit best are Dark and Slaanesh primarily, but also Shadow, Death, and perhaps even Fire. I think the Doomfire Sorcerer would serve as a good counter to the Lore Master. Now before we move on to units, I want to just cover Shadowblade, who will be the legendary hero, I'm sure, for this DLC. Known as the Death That Walks Unseen, he is the chief Khainite assassin of Kronhelbron. He is one of the upper echelon assassins of any race in Warhammer history. He should feel like a Deathmaster Snicketch for Dark Elves in battle. He would primarily buff Khainite assassin heroes and any other Khainite units, but perhaps also Shades to be more well-rounded. For war gear, he bears the Heart of Woe, which explodes into 1,000 deadly shards if its bearer is slain. Additionally, he has a Potion of Diabolical Strength, brewed by Helebron herself, which would make all his melee stats go brrrr. Finally, because Shadowblade is a servant of Helebron, and Helebron is lawfully rivals with Morathi, Shadowblade might not be available to Morathi or Malekith. This gives more credence to give them their own heroes, as aforementioned in my FLC video. Now, despite what you may have read on some forum, there are quite a few missing units for Dark Elves, but let's start with the ones more likely to be in the DLC, being those that fit the Black Ark theme. The centerpiece unit is likely to be the Sea Dragon, called Minluai Sarath in Eltharin, is a massive marine reptile that is the largest of the Dark Elf seagoing monsters, easily capable of carrying a spired castle on its back, crewed by Druki. There are also tales about monstrous creatures living in the placid Tilian Sea called dragonfish that match the description of a sea dragon. Sea dragon cloaks are made from the scales of these creatures. These cloaks can be drawn around close to the body to protect against arrows and bullets and are common amongst the Black Ark Corsairs. It is said that once long ago the sea dragons were true dragons, ridden by the ancestors of the Dark Elves, but down the centuries they have been infused with the evil magics that permeate the Black Arks. They have mutated, becoming something less than true dragons and yet more. The sea dragons have grown so gigantic that they have lost the power of flight and have to spend their lives afloat to support their own weight. Even so, they remain capable of ripping asunder the biggest ships of other intelligent races' fleets. Legend has it that in the Civil War of the Sundering between the High Elves and the Dark Elves, a Dark Elf dragon was struck from the sky by a mighty High Elf champion. The dragon fell into the sea where the dark cooling waters bathed its wounds and provided refuge from the battle. It is said that the sea dragons are descended from this beast. And with the sea dragon we get our first regiment of renown. The notable Ogrenir was the first sea dragon to be captured by the Dark Elves, and the cloak of Hagreif was made from its scales. So in Total War, the Black Ark Corsairs have 80 armor, Black Dragons have 90, Dreadsaurians have 120, and Frostworms have 110. For lore reasons, Sea Dragon cloaks of the Corsairs provide at least 80. For roster balance, I think it should out-armor the Black Dragon, and for gameplay, it's a very large target that is also a slithering reptilian, so upwards of 100 to 120 armor. It would likely be slow on land like the Charybdis, as they are aquatic and fight best in water. It should have 3 powerful unique breath attacks like any other dragon. Whether a sea dragon could easily haul a spired howdah on land as easily as in water is unlikely, but with units such as the Marienburg landship in game, it only feels right that the Dark Elves get some sort of equivalent. The Spired Howdah variant would be armed with either Dark Shards, City Guards, Corsairs with handbows, repeater bolt throwers, or perhaps these spires could even shoot magical projectiles. As such, these could act as mounts for Anethra and Duriath Helbane, as well as Black Ark Fleetmasters. Moving on to the sea dragons lesser in size but also more ferocious, cousin species, the Helldrakes, of which I can see 3 potential variants. The Helldrake pack would be a monstrous unit with perhaps a dozen entities more or less. Unburdened by massive weight like the sea dragon, the lithe Helldrakes slither forth at great speed. While the former may have only 46 speed, the Helldrakes may have up to 66 speed, such as the Tomb King's Necropolis Knights. Their fangs are known to be able to bite through the thickest steel. Much like the howdah of the sea dragon, Helldrakes are known to pull spire-tipped chariots known as Doom Reavers. In Man of War, these were meant to be ships that were used like chariots. For Total War's sake, though, I see no reason why we couldn't throw a set of wheels in these bad boys, though. Except for maybe the tail getting caught in the wheels or some such, but I have faith the animation team could make it work. The Doom Reavers come in a squadron of 4. Besides being a monstrous chariot, I would want to lean into the magical projectiles I mentioned for the Sea Dragon's howdah. Helldrakes are bred by Dark Elf sorcerers, so this makes enough sense and would fill an interesting role. The Doom Reavers are crewed by a small number of specially trained beast handlers. They guide the Helldrakes with magical lances that send explosive bursts of agony ripping through the creatures if they disobey. In Total War, this may mean that the standard Helldrake pack would have the Rampage rule. For the Doom Reaver chariots and potentially the Sea Dragon with howdah, they have a rule similar to the Thunder Barge or Landship, this being a toggling ability that, while activated, does self-damage over time, but boosts speed and maneuverability. Helldrake Knights is just something I inferred, and is extremely unlikely, but in a DLC that will also likely include the Serpent Knights of Slaanesh. I thought it possible, mayhaps. It's more to say, though, that Helldrakes and or Doom Reavers could be potential mounts for the Helbanes, Black Ark Fleetmasters, but also Beast Slaver heroes or High Beastmaster lords. Speaking of those Helldrakes, let's move on to infantry, the first unit being the Black Ark Helldrake Tamers. Yeah, those specially trained beast handlers with magical lances I was talking about before, what if we straight up made them into their own infantry unit? And I would also arm them with whips and nets and potentially give them stock attributes so they would act like a more elite version of units like Eshin Triads and Nasty Skulkers, sneak them up on an enemy, monster, net it once revealed, get on it and whittle it down with stunning, magical, and anti-large attacks. Additionally, they should have a passive or bound ability that allows them to stop allied Helldrakes from rampaging. Could include other monsters such as the Manticore, though, as well. This unit and the next unit would benefit from the same skills and technology that benefit Black Ark Corsairs. Speaking of, I think the roster just needs more Black Ark infantry in general. This brings us to the Black Ark Reavers. Much like the tabletop champion unit for Chameleon Skinks, the Chameleon Stalkers was given its own unit for Total War. I think it would be awesome to have that same equivalent for Corsairs. They could be interpreted similarly where the Reavers are the same entity count, but all their stats are a bit upgraded. Or they could reduce the entity count down to, say, 32, so it's a proper champion unit. Sea Dragon Cloak armor, anti-infantry, hand bows, but the real kicker perhaps is that they should have a net ability like the Helldrake Tamers, only this time it's focused on catching infantry. Additionally, we could have the Krakensides as our second regiment of renown. In the end times, they were the last surviving Corsairs aboard Malekith's the Tower of Oblivion Black Ark. Another sensible ROR is a Mangul Manhide's Flayers, which could be a good ROR for Reavers or Corsairs, but I personally would like the Flayers to be an ROR for Shades. City Guard are 2 Dark Elves, as Lothern Sea Guard are 2 High Elves, or at least should be in Total War, and I am surprised that this isn't already a thing. They are the elite core of city garrisons of the Dark Elves. They wear light armor, spears, and repeating crossbows, and may additionally carry shields. An incredibly solid mid-tier infantry for recruitment, and S-tier for versatility, which brings us to another potential ROR, Drakira's Claws. These Grondian Dread Spears join Tyrion in the end times seeking vengeance. I think it makes plenty of sense to make them a City Guard ROR in Total War, though. Then, as I was mentioning with the Doom Reavers maybe having like magical projectiles, there is a unit that just gets a mention called a Dark Elf Sky Reaper, which, as described, is a smaller variant of the standard Reaper Bolt Thrower of the Dark Elf fleet. Like its larger brethren, the Sky Reaper is a magazine-fed ballista that fills the air with barbed bolts. Maybe, since, the Reaper Bolt Thrower isn't like a crazy, high-tier artillery already, maybe the Sky Reaper could be a variant that's actually higher tier and has, like, magical projectiles, as I was saying. That's just an idea, though. Then, with the FLC rework to Malekith, I think he should get the Lords of Oblivion as a legendary unit. These are Black Drakes, or lesser Black Dragons. They are ridden by high-ranking officers of Malekith's Black Guard of Nagarond. They would function much the same as Altherion's Knights of Torgabal, being flying monstrous cavalry, of which you can recruit 1 per Tier 5 province. The only big differences being the Lords of Oblivion would have anti-large attacks, because, Blackguard, and Dragon Breath attacks. And for the final, most likely unit, we of course should get all the Merworm variants as FLC, the bottle green poison-dealing Merworms for the High Elves, the pale frostbite-dealing Pagowyrms for the Dark Elves, and the dark, possibly undead Pseudo for the Vampire Coast. Again, though, these should be FLC, as all the assets are already in-game. In no world should we have to pay for them. But wait, there's more. Again, with the FLC rework to Malekith Morathi, we should get the Hydra variants from Tabletop. Royal Hydras are Malekith's chosen, transformed to grow bony armor plates and spit acidic breath through a ritual of spellcraft. Spellthirster Hydras were created by Morathi that are physically weaker but have innate magic resistance. Perhaps they also have a magical breath attack and, like the Lamassu, have an aura that silences spellcasters. These 2 variants would be exclusive to their respective lords, but then we come to our last variant, the Veteran War Hydra. potentially recruitable by any faction, would either be tier 5 and expensive or a legendary unit. Known as the Claws of Khaine, they are the most battle-hardened and well-trained, coming with a handful of unique abilities. Fetch makes it focus on killing an enemy character. Escort makes it focus on defending its masters. In Total War, the Guardian rule. Battle Lover makes it faster, but also rampage. Chameleon Skinned makes it have stalk. That's right, you heard me. This Hydra could go invisible with its surroundings, like camouflage. And Bloodthirsty means it has trouble differentiating friend from foe, which probably wouldn't translate to Total War. But all that together makes a very powerful monster. Then we have Manticore Dread Knights, which would be even more like the Knights of Torgaval than the Lords of Oblivion. Perhaps Manticore Knights could be the legendary unit, and then Lords of Oblivion would be a regiment of renown for the legendary unit? Possibly. For our last monster, we have the Bonnakon, which I mentioned in my last video for Slaanesh, check top right. They were used by Ark Beastmasters during the Sundering. They appear bull-like and secrete stinking fumes. This would be a smaller single-entity monster, fast with a hard-hitting charge, but otherwise squishy. The real reason you would bring it is its debilitating aura and to hunt easy backline targets. And can you believe it, there is even more units. The last few focused on Khaine, the first two being ethereal units, and the last a construct, which are unit types that don't currently exist in the Dark Elf roster. The Maelithii are spirits of dead Druki that serve powerful sorcerers as familiars, or the Cult of Khaine as temple guardians. They can't be harmed by conventional weapons as ethereal units, and would deal frostbite attacks similar to Cairn Wraiths. The Rephallim of Erithkial are the invisible wraith servants of the Pale Queen of the Underworld. Their duty is to drag the souls of elves to her so that they too can become her servants. These may be more like Sirens, except they have the stalk ability and vanguard deployment, making them quite versatile. Lastly, we have a single entity large construct in the Avatar of Khaine, which as far as I'm aware is not technically in fantasy as a unit, but is for AOS and 40k, but I see no reason it couldn't work for Total War. It may be the size of, say, a bone giant with a focus on anti-infantry or dueling other monsters, and may have an aura that buffs allies or rampages enemies, and obviously all three of the aforementioned units have the crumbling rules. But can you believe it, because on an exhaustive list as this, you can make any of the champion units work if you wanted to. Some I didn't mention already, being Bloodshades for Shades, Handmaidens of Shards for Sisters of Slaughter, Drake Masters for Harganeth Executioners, and Heralds for Dark Riders, but they ride Dark Pegasi instead of steeds. Obviously, all these units would be more elite counterparts of their accompanying standard unit. And with that, we finally come to a close for all my Dark Elf speculation between my FLC video and this DLC video. If you enjoyed this, please like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you soon.